Well, that is good stuff to know, and thank you very much for that. I love you all so much. I learned such cool stuff. And so with that, we should talk super hot attractive pepper scale. Shaps. Sheeps. Shaps says sheeps. Yeah, not that like Scoville's an especially sexy unit of measure for heat, but but just calling it like HPLC, it's like, I want to say something cool. Like eating hot stuff is kind of a bragging right, and so I want a cool acronym, or I want to, I don't know. I guess saying like, yeah, it's 11 billion Scovilles. And you're like, yeah, 11 billion Scovilles. But 11 billion is just such an incomprehensible number. And when your tongue is just like it's hot or it's not. We don't discriminate, says Olivia. It's noticeable. Ghost peppers are very noticeable. I mean, if the next highest one is double that, then I mean that's a big jump. Becoming unconscious, talking about hot stuff, right? Can be a steep price to pay in a noir narrative because of each player character's role in the game and how dependent the rest of the party might be on their skills. In addition to the setback in capability the party experiences, the most obvious problem with a character being knocked unconscious remains true. The player is removed from participating until the character is brought back to consciousness. Danger abounds in a noir game, and to make the mechanics of D&D better suit the gritty hopelessness of such a story, you might want to incorporate injuries into your game in addition to the normal hit point system, which you might better explain as adrenaline or stamina. By using injuries, you can create setbacks that not only generate drama and tension, but serve as limiters to discourage overtly reckless behavior while enhancing the concept of mortality and physical limitations. If the characters can overcome their limitations by pushing past their injuries, the labors of their adventures become that much more memorable and triumphant, and such decisive triumphs are a rare occurrence in noir stories. Optional mechanics. Below are some optional mechanics that you can use to increase the party's attention and the game's tension during the most critical junctures between life and death. Injury and saving throws. Whenever you end a turn or suffer damage with 0 hit points, you don't fall unconscious but must make a special saving throw called an injury saving throw as your traumas mount. Each time you fail an injury saving throw, you immediately receive 1 additional injury. Roll a d20. If the roll is 10 or higher, you succeed. On your 3rd success, you become stable. Otherwise, you fail and receive an injury. On your 3rd cumulative failure, you die. Magical healing of 6th level or higher, such as heal and regenerate, immediately removes all of your injuries. Each time you fail an injury saving throw, subtract the number rolled from 10 and record the result. Each injury heals after a number of full rests equal to the result, but the rests need not be consecutive. For example, if you roll an 8, the injury you receive requires 2 days of full rests to heal. When you're hit with an attack while at 0 hit points, the attacker can choose to knock you out instead of dealing the attack's damage. You instantly fall unconscious and are stable. This unconsciousness ends if you regain any hit points. It also ends if you take damage from another source and you must make an injury saving throw as normal. Rolling 1 or 20. When you make an injury saving throw and roll a 1 on the d20, it counts as 2 injuries. If you roll a 20 on the d20, you regain 1 hit point and overcome your latest injury if you have sustained any. Damage at 0 hit points. If you take any damage after you have reached 0 hit points, you must immediately make an injury saving throw. If the damage is from a critical hit and you fail the saving throw, you suffer 2 injuries instead. If the damage equals or exceeds your hit point maximum, you suffer instant death. The death. Kind of when Vox Machina was known as the super height intensity team, or the, yeah. Oh, that's a big old difference. Yeah, so Olivia's pointing out that the current state of hot peppers is that of I guess pre-war for pre-war of Azeroth math in World of Warcraft, where your average DPS is like 2 million, on a dagger. It'll go up from there, but yes, this is an option, especially because Coffee, with this style of storytelling, they're encouraging players to play as level 0 characters, so you just have your race in your background. But it's telling, because in Eberron, they're saying that most people who've come back from the last war, like this great big war, were maybe level 1. And the people who are good at their jobs are maybe level 3. And so for a lot of this, to help increase the suspense and the danger, it's encouraging a lot of low-level play. So you don't have spells that just instantly do stuff for you. Like, you still have to do it. Because in Eberron, magic is broad, but not deep. So there's a lot of magic, just not a lot of powerful magic. What are you going to do for 4 years? I wait, I guess. I mean, if you want to have some inspired writing during that time. But, I mean, really, this is your character and story. How you want to handle any sort of in or out of character time is completely up to you. Oh, yeah, Technotron, I'd love to. And by the way, so Technotron does a lot of cool stuff with D&D and Legos. Watch his streams, everyone. And Technotron, if you want to put a link, to your channel, you're welcome to do so, brother. Is this a it's a Lego Drider? Oh my gosh. Look at that. A Lego Drider. So yeah, this is kind of like death saving throws. It allows it to be more dramatic, because if you want to describe injuries, you can do so instead. And I like that, especially because of the low-level nature, where healing might not always be available. The mechanic of naturally healing over the course of several long rests. Kill the Lego dead, says Klepto. Not a fan of spiders, or just drow and driders in particular? Dungeon Masters describe hit point loss in different ways, and you typically don't show signs of injury. When an attack reduces you to 0 hit points, injuries should become evident. It's up to you or the Dungeon Master to describe any injuries in a way that is consistent with the situation and type of damage sustained in action. Oh, anything with drow sets you on edge? I might have some interesting stories for you, especially if we're talking about death and injury. The best way to stabilize a creature is to heal it. If healing is unavailable, a creature's injuries can be stabilized with a successful DC 10 Wisdom Medicine check. A stable creature doesn't make injury saving throws, even though it has 0 hit points, and it wakes up if it was unconscious. The creature stops being stable if it takes any damage. When a stable creature with an injury takes an action on its turn, it must make a DC 10 Constitution saving throw. If it has 0 hit points at the end of its turn. On a failure, it aggravates its wounds, immediately sustaining an injury, and must start making injury saving throws again, unless it is healed, stabilized again, or it dies. The DC for the Constitution throw increases by 5 for each additional injury. So that it's a little bit of a tax on constantly struggling and flailing when you're full of holes or you're tearing your muscles. Yep. That harkens back a little bit to 3rd edition and what happens if you are at 0 hit points. If any of you are familiar. All right, Victor, lurk away. You know you're welcome to do so. Yeah, Klepto. Yeah, do you want to press on? You know, is the juice worth the squeeze? You know, are you Hardigan from Sin City? And knowing your condition, is it worth pushing on in order to rescue the kid? It's not over till it's over, says Coffee Cat. Mastering Noir. In the simplest terms, a deceptive client might initiate a relatively simple or routine challenge to begin the adventure. This client is likely associated with the greater problem in some way, and the challenge spirals out of control or leads to clues that hint at a grand scheme that the characters are in no way prepared to handle. Each smaller case solved gleans some small clue that places the characters in the right place at the right time with the wrong people. The protagonists might eventually gain the upper hand through investigative action and shrewd wit, often leading to a blaze of brawn. But escalation of force rarely comes without consequence. The hallmark of noir, unlike other tonal mysteries, is that the series of seemingly unconnected events aren't coincidence. Every inconsistency adds up, even if temporarily obscured by the secrets and sins of the individual central to these schemes. As the overarching story unfolds, these encounters are revealed to be connected by the clues that come from each encounter, and the truth of the matter is far bigger than any outside observer could have anticipated. If any of you are my players on Tuesday, or if you've been watching the Tuesday game, I wonder if this is kind of making you itch a little bit. Noir adventures can be bleak for DMs and players alike, which is why it is an advanced narrative that must be well communicated throughout. But in return, they invite a grander, more cerebral, contemplative, and daring approach to roleplay. Characters will often witness daily transgressions or violence perpetuated by organized crime, and the machinations of corrupt legal systems that often offer more justice for the criminal, while the sacrifices of the hardworking average citizen go unnoticed and unrewarded. These stories aren't for the faint of heart and shouldn't be treaded lightly or blindly. Check in with your players at the beginning and end of each session to make sure they remain comfortable and enthusiastic about the approach to the narrative. This is effectively the deep end of storytelling, and characters will sink or swim based on the quandaries the DM provides. If each choice is a clear-cut decision, and there is no discussion of right or wrong, ethics, and morals, the characters can't grow, and subsequently the character's personal story is neglected. While you prepare your players for the campaign, ensure that the characters have a variety of outlooks. Klepto says it's not over until I'm lying there in a pool of their blood or mine. I was about to say Tuesday Cat Comics. Coffee Cat Comics says makes me itch for my IRL game and for the Tuesday game. I am also not the best at putting clues together, though. Well, but that's why the VODs are there, and why I've offered some recaps and other things. Plus you can always try and prompt, if you have a question, prompt a question. If you've noticed, as you all talk in character, whether you were meaning to or not, if a particular topic gets close enough, I will call for some sort of a knowledge check to see if that idea actually surfaces in front of you all as you're having this conversation. But that won't happen unless there's discussion and the possibility for the thought or the connection can be there. Clues are like fun little slices of cake. Even if you don't solve the mystery and get the whole cake, at least you have some. I'm available on Friday, your time, which is Saturday, my time. For to play with whom? A campaign structure around noir. Sorry. This is such a good perfect mix, slow burn. It's nice ghost pepper salsa con queso. Oh, no problem, Rosia. In the beginning, an individual mystery or a pedestrian task are perfect one-offs to kickstart a noir-style campaign. Many stories start with the phrase, "It was a day like any other," to illustrate how innocuous this start to a noir's grand scheme seems. To the characters' perspectives, the problems in front of them should be simple, but later reveal themselves to be much more complicated. When choosing how you might start a noir story, don't get caught up in weaving a complex narrative from the first beat with any simple challenge that could work. As with most long-running campaigns, allow the characters to latch onto things that seem important to them, and then craft the story around those threads. It'll be easier to draw distant characters back into the action if someone or something they feel strongly about is implicated. Focus facilitating the group's session 0, gathering plot hooks from the things each highlights as central to their characters, taking special note of their fall from grace, their vices, and what they lost along the way. A noir plot looks to string together a bevy of mini mysteries, crime scenes, coincidences, and a lot of legwork that all add up to the greater overall plot. This might take the form of back alley bargains, coordinated deception, blackmail, street fights, and maybe even a big heist the characters must accomplish against their will. If there's a big conspiracy that the players must foil, how many breadcrumb mysteries are required to create that big moment? Once you have established the necessary hints, allow the players time to piece together the clues, giving them the agency to discover and unravel the plot in a timely manner. The slow crawl of noir stories is all about timing, and the DM may be steps ahead of the party. The reveal of the convoluted web of lies might feel forced if the group hasn't had a hunch that they've been lied to in the first place. Diadem's Chemison has been very generous tonight. In fact, Derek even stepped up and has offered to draw art for Chemison because of the generosity to the channel that has been shown. Protagonists don't have to be heroic or even likable for noir stories to succeed. Endings don't have to be happy. The form and style should reflect the themes that make noir unique, and using the optional rules like slow natural healing or adding gritty realism. By the way, that is gritty realism. These are optional. So by the way, playstyle is talked about generally on page 34 here. Campaign theme. Tiers of play. It's here we go. Sword and sorcery, heroic fantasy, epic fantasy, mythic fantasy, dark fantasy, intrigue, swashbuckling. You want to play in wuxia, which is kind of Oriental adventures style. And there's gritty. All right, so here are some rule options about inspiration. If you want to have, so here we go, epic heroism. If you want to have gritty realism, this variant uses a short rest of 8 hours and a long rest of 7 days. This puts the brakes on the campaign, requiring the players to carefully judge the benefits and drawbacks of combat. Characters can't afford to engage in too many battles in a row, and all adventuring requires careful planning. This approach encourages the characters to spend time out of the dungeon. It's a good option for campaigns that emphasize intrigue, politics, and interactions among other NPCs, and in which combat is rare or something to be avoided rather than rushed into. So it's great that this is referencing some of the other optional rules, which, you know, maybe not a lot of us are aware of that in the DMG about different ways to heal, tackle inspiration. You know, firearms are an option if you want, explosives. Rest variants, it talks about different ways to tell a story. This is super focused on noir, but the DMG as the core rulebook can at least touch on it and get you thinking about it. Narration that incorporates subtle pauses, stilted phrases, and stagnated pacing can help a DM to deliver clues and emphasize story points with gravitas, akin to the gritty noir themes throughout the session. Juxtaposition of simile rather than metaphor allows the character to inject their own emotional qualifiers into the conversation and shape the path of the story. Ooh, all right, hang on. Remember, simile and metaphor are descriptive terms. Metaphor is a lot more subtle. Simile is maybe more narrative, using like or as. So in this case, let's say that the goblin bounty hunter that we were talking about before caught back up with the Dragonborn from the bar. And from the Dragonborn's perspective, he goes on to describe how the goblin jumped off of a dumpster and just like came down right across his snoot with a right cross. And the Dragonborn would describe being hit, and that little bastard caught me across the snoot like a stagecoach hit me. Like a stagecoach. I was hit as hard as a stagecoach. That is simile. A metaphor is a little more indirect, where it would be a stagecoach with the size of a goblin, but all of the force hit me in the alleyway. Simile metaphor was a Slytherin, right? In order to maintain the atmosphere of a noir story, there are several thematic elements that should remain present throughout. These themes emphasize the characters' places in a setting that is bleak, allow their ideals to stand out, and makes their flaws feel right at home. Without these elements, the very notion of a noir story is lost. Because the themes ground the narrative in a style that is dependent on contrast. I have a little cheese in my beard, sorry about that. Consider the following subjects and discuss them during your session 0. And again with each player individually. You're in an amoral world. The world of a noir story is stereotypically dark and stormy. And the community usually has a seedy underworld just waiting to embrace the player characters. The pace should be equally as grueling, even using fights to highlight reminders of the broken, treacherous, and unsavory surroundings. The world is a character itself and should feel as such. Make it come alive with regular expression and personifications. It's usually worthwhile to help the players understand the moment they're in, which is key to keeping their actions in check and not ruining the campaign for everyone else. This is also why I say Curse of Strahd is probably the closest of the mods that I've read through, and I've run, that has a noir style to it. In every game, the world is only as real as it is consistent. Most settings can get away with minor inconsistencies, forgiving oversight in favor for the established narrative. The noir setting requires greater attention to detail and consistency, as each modification to the normality that is established during represents a new fact or clue. For characters to be able to effectively pick out the subtle clues that will build the tension of the case and reveal the true culprit, consistency is paramount. Cynicism, fatalism, and pessimism. The underworld is a dark place of fleeting hope. Its denizens have filled the void inside their hearts with carnal distractions and replaced their virtuous endeavors with pursuits of vice. Characters that the players encounter will often seek the mollification of their troubles over doing the right thing. Characters who have made themselves at home in these settings often lack the same motivations of the players and view many endeavors outside the norm, if not at all, as pointless. Extrinsic versus intrinsic rewards. In a noir-style game, extrinsic and intrinsic rewards are of equal value. You might not want to reward your players in items or experience, but always includes goodwill, information, and reputation. It's okay to give out magic items, but give players the choice to turn them down in favor of the goodwill of a neighboring faction. Noir stories assume that at the start of the story, the player characters don't matter. By becoming more important and influential, they stand to gain as much power as they would from gaining a level or a magic item. The DM must communicate the gritty, slow-crawling detail to the players before getting started so the players understand their rewards and the challenge that come with obtaining them. However, the players must understand that the world doesn't revolve around them, and they are constantly working against an ever-evolving plot that isn't dependent on their whims. From zero to hero. Most players are accustomed to racking up XP to level, but noir stories really thrive on milestone leveling, where the prospect of gaining new skills can help motivate the players into solving the crime, especially for players that enjoy character advancement and optimization. This can be done by awarding a set amount of experience based on the successes the group brings out. Consider the optional rules for characters starting without a class to reinforce their initial significance in the world. Even the most impulsive characters are less likely to pick a fight when each situation has the potential to kill them outright. See the sidebar on zero-level characters earlier in the chapter. It'd be interesting. It'd definitely be different than what many D&D games, or even a lot of fantasy games in general, play. Once the tendencies and vices to the setting are established within the game, offer them as options for the players to use as they create their characters. Further, reward the play of these vices. Don't just use them to punish the players. Perhaps fulfilling a vice leads to the coincidental clue that had stumped the party until now. For example, if a party supplants an underground speakeasy, a character whose vices favor carousing might be tempted to allow a bartender underling to escape arrest. Later, as a reward, their underling confidant can provide new leads when a case goes cold, and complicate matters when the bartender's story presents another risk for the party to overcome. Group composition. Most Dungeons & Dragons games are free-for-all for backgrounds, character classes, and races. However, these factors are all very informative to the events of a noir story. In juxtaposition to the usual party roles of tanks, damage, healers, or utility, consider discussing the diverse team of specialists more suited to espionage or heist narratives. During character creation, encourage the concept that the noir style can encompass many different genres, and the group will need a flexible arsenal, allowing the character best equipped for a specific task to shine. Discuss some examples of how the D&D related classes might relate to the common roles of fantasy noir stories in your setting to help players establish the role they want to occupy within the group. Artificers, bards, paladins, rangers, and rogues work well as confidence manipulators, infiltrators, or classic saboteurs, just as barbarians and fighters represent obvious muscle. Clerics, scions, sorcerers, and wizards might all inhabit the space of a mystical adept or specialist with a particular field of study. Nerd! Yeah, right? Nobody here but us nerds. The more public the figure, by the way, intelligent villains, the more public the figure, the more layers of plausible deniability or separation a villain will have built into their schemes. One mystery might take many, many sessions to unfold. In a noir-style setting, it is normal for the players to have many clues to piece together, and as they get close, the villain is usually a few paces ahead with an escape plan. However, the careful use of intrinsic rewards, the expendable lieutenants, can keep the enthusiasm of the delayed gratification required to chase a villain across many continents and worlds for years. There's a happy camper. It was Old Man Wilkins! Oh, damn those meddling kids! Each scene or encounter should benefit from clues that specific characters can use their unique skills to unearth to benefit the party. Noir, that should probably be poses. Noir poses particularly fertile ground for spotlighting the contributions and familiarity with inconsistencies that might be evident to certain backgrounds, classes, and races. For instance, instead of general group ability checks as the party searches the room, the DM might volunteer that the rogue notices a desk drawer with a false bottom because of their experience confiscating valuables from noble families. Similarly, one with a noble background might also have a similar eye for such hiding spots. This method of highlighting party members rewards This method of highlighting party members rewards the players for choosing a skill set and contribution in the unique role they chose that might advance the plot. Or that advances the plot. When group checks might be necessary, but the information isn't, a DM might set a task beyond the reach of a non-specialized role or assign varying difficulty checks from one class to the next. In either case, the method of discovery should be specialized to the character, even if the information isn't, and different than whatever the main clue the party will find. Crafting clues to suit the specialties of the group can be a rewarding creative endeavor. For instance, the party enters the crime scene of a murder investigation, making quick work of the more obvious clues, including the stab wound along the midsection. A character with proficiency in medicine might surmise this singular wound shouldn't have been enough to kill the target, and evidence of discoloration indicating a rare poison. Additionally, an assassin character might be able to identify the poison and leads concerning the black market merchants that sell it. Perhaps a ranger notes a footprint with a particular mud clay residue, narrowing the search area, while the muscle can judge the skill of the assailant by the athleticism required to navigate the escape route. The same distinctions could be made for a character's race or background. A character with a noble background might immediately recognize the seal of a noble house, while the criminal in the group may be the only character who stands a chance of gaining an audience with an influential crime lord. Additionally, the only tiefling in the group could decipher a cryptic message written in Abyssal and understand what it references to. The only thing I do, says Bombard, to have the villain's lieutenant be the obvious villain, but have the player's closest ally be the real villain. Oh, yeah, so yeah, you have the thing that should be the obvious villain. But they may be villainous, but they're definitely not, like, the villain. Purposeful isolation. Typically, the main characters in these stories feel alone, even in big cities. This can be a challenge for a DM because the players are in a group. By showing the player characters that the inhabitants regard them indifferently, or they care more about not getting into trouble with the factions within their neighborhoods, you can create a sense of isolation that suggests the same futility the player characters strive to reject. Focusing on the characters' day jobs can provide some early adventure hooks to encourage the use of their professional traits and background features, help them earn their keep, and acclimate them to the humdrum of their everyday on their own. Once they've learned the trust and respect of those individuals in some way, this feeling of isolation might lessen, as isolation is one of many challenges the party faces. As the campaign continues, there are ways to create this isolation on a larger scale, by exhibiting the way outside communities feel about the one the characters inhabit, and what it means to be from there. Ultimately, this should create a sense of pride in our champions, and through their perseverance, their influence will grow to encompass each new ring of their surroundings. Relationships and reputation. There's going to be an awesome chart coming up here for this. Every workplace, every school, every religious organization or group of friends comprises a unique faction within its own varying levels of notoriety and sway within a noir world. Further, the underbelly is shaped by those that inhabit it alongside the characters, and the usual suspects might include anything from surly club owners, bartenders, bouncers, femme fatales, black market fences, and busboys, all bustling about the world after dark. The characters aren't the only ones with relationships involving various factions. Someone as lowly as a paperboy might have a mobster for a cousin. A baker might be under a mobster's protection, and for a price, the characters might gain favor, information, or other forms of leverage by playing or preying on these relationships. Work with your players to create a rich web of contacts. By the way, if any of you have a chance to watch Macabre Derek is an expert at this. He has a methodology and a mentality to make this kind of a relationship web. It flows, it's structural, it's organically grown. So I would urge you all, watch Derek's channel and see him at work. He does this very well. In Eberron, most commoners rarely, if ever, see archetypical characters close up, and inquiring minds will relish the opportunity to interact with characters they recognize for good or ill. For perspective, the legendary war hero and leader of Brayland, King Boronel Ir Wynarn, is only a fighter of 7th level, but known throughout the continent of Corvair, if not the world. Distant villages and far-off kingdoms might send requests for audience, while reputable newspapers and not-so-reputable tabloids might help publicize a character's exploits, or discredit a character's endeavors or following, adding yet another layer of intrigue and political sabotage to an advancing campaign. Derek's good at this. In fact, I don't know, Derek, depending if you're free, after we make our characters on Thursday for Friday, maybe I might be able to tap you to be sort of a guest DM to try and link all this stuff together and give us some contemplation for the characters and for the types of stories we could tell with them. So yeah, by the way, that's the power scale in Eberron. A king known throughout the biggest, most populous continent of this great war is level 7. Yeah, if you have time, just let me know. Rosia, this is more of oh, howdy, Zesty Utters. Will I do something like this? Maybe. But it's going to be more for an exercise, a workshop about creating a noir campaign than running it. See, there we go. Klepto's got it. I mean, that's why in 5th edition, your epic level begins at level 17. And this is in a normal, a lot of people are probably like level 5 or 6 if they've served in the military. And, like Faerun compared to Eberron, big power creep difference. (17 through 20), yeah, they're like demigods in 5th ed. Eventually, you may choose to involve different styles of celebrity, full-time paparazzi, and scrying devices as the character's reach expands and they become relevant topics of gossip, or recognized throughout this and other planes. If the campaign reaches its highest levels, the strengths, weaknesses, and tendencies of the characters would likely be known throughout the multiverse. Use the following table to relay the reach of a character's notoriety as they advance in level. So this is excellent, right? Level 0 characters, you're just, you hit the streets. You want to be a somebody, but you can't be a somebody unless you're a nobody first. No one really knows you. No one cares about you. I mean, maybe your close family does. That's it. At level 1, all right, you've done a couple things, and in your district, in your neighborhood, yeah, people recognize you. Hey, you did a good job beating up that bully. And the old lady in the one apartment will give you a pie. Congratulations, you're level 1. That's your reward, is a pie. Ah, level 2. You're recognized. People may go out of their way. In fact, the granny that baked you a pie might say, I have a granddaughter that I would love to see married. And, with your wit and skills, I think she'd be in good hands. Level 3, Metropolitan Relevant. Level 4, Metropolitan Recognized. National Relevant, National Recognized. 9, International Relevant. 13, International Recognized. Interplanetary at level 15 in this scale. Recognized interplanetary at 17. And universally known at 20. There's a capstone for you. There's a capstone. Rosia, you'd slay a dragon for a pie. And I want you to compare this to... let me find it again. I want you to compare this to the... Oh, heck. I think it was even earlier on. Well, number 1, these are the core assumptions that the rule books were written in. So obviously Eberron is going to be challenging these core assumptions. However, in here it discusses the tiers of play that, going by the, what we might consider to be like normal D&D world assumptions. Here we go. Tiers of play. 1 to 4, your local heroes. So by level 4, your farming community is still like, yeah, you know what? Those are some good boys and girls. They're doing what's right. Five to 10, your heroes of the realm. So now, not just your province thanks you, like the kingdom or like your county or whatever. Your kingdom may. Masters of the realm. Ah, here we go. Now we're getting noticed. Now the king doesn't just want to invite us for a ceremony. The king wants to invite us for council. From 11 to 16. And then finally, Masters of the World. 17 through 20, because that's epic levels. Compare that. Right? Compare that to the power in Eberron and the storytelling differences. By the time that the king is going to invite you to a dinner to celebrate putting down like a goblin chieftain or something, levels 5 to 10. In Eberron, you are a national bordering on internationally relevant personality. By the time that you would be a master of the realm, not even just a hero of the realm, but you're getting a castle or, you're the commander of a fort or whatever. In Eberron, You are starting with interplanetary, if such a thing you want to play with exists. In an Eberron, there's a lot of planes that are very close to Eberron, so kind of planet hopping is a thing. But look at the difference between normal D&D and Eberron. In the Tuesday game, everyone is going to hit level 8 on this next session. So they're doing some pre-gaming. Level 8, okay. They're heroes of the realm. Yeah, they've stepped up. They've done stuff. They're making NPC contacts. They're more relevant in the world. They've traveled around. This is one island in the entirety of Mesotopia that they've gained this sort of notoriety. At level 8 in Eberron, if I were to transport the Tuesday group into Eberron, they would have so much power in that setting. They would be nationally recognized and could take on the king of all Corvair. Right? He's only a level 7 fighter. So bear this in mind with your storytelling. And also realize not all epic stories have to go to epic levels. You can end a story at like level 12. You can end a story at level 6 and it is a good, solid story. Ending an Eberron story around level 6 or like 7 as kind of the capstone, where you're recognized nationally, so 7 or 8. Congratulations, you've lived a full life, especially given everything we've just discussed above with this kind of noir-style setting. Have we, though? We've barely done anything to make progress in any of the crises going on. You all haven't really stopped to take measure, so you can certainly ask yourself that question. But you need to see what's going on. It's understandable you feel that way, Coffee. I'm not going to take that away from you. Though complications could arise, consider how the adventure might encourage splitting the party to accomplish their goals. Through careful and consistent reinforcement of the populace, players should learn that the characters who behave appropriate to their surroundings should come to no harm. But make sure that the story motivates the purpose behind splitting the party, and results remain consistent to the actions the party would take if they remained together. When the stakes are set appropriately, players will focus on the story, even during scenes their characters are absent, because they'll want to know every detail. For most noir stories, movement is contained within an urban environment or one specific neighborhood. As the players advance, perhaps after their first big story arc has been solved, they can branch out to a new location, even as vast as a sprawling countryside. But travel should take its shape in the form of narrative context to continue the tone even as the characters make their way away from the city. It's a good thing when a local baker tosses a little extra into the dozen. It's another thing entirely when the wizard in the tower down the road is plotting against you. That's why, no matter where I go, I always carry a wand of disguise. Sometimes two. Alright. I'm not going to go over all of these Gumshoe Chronicles. I'll go over one as an example, but I want to give you something to think about and to encourage you to pick up this supplement as an excellent primer to this kind of storytelling and D&D content. This final chapter of the book contains a selection of 0-level adventures called the Gumshoe Chronicles, aptly named for the series of mysteries that your players will be tasked with solving. The Brooch Poacher mysteries are part of a set, while the others may be inserted anywhere, concluding with the adventure Gumshoe Graduation Day. These chronicles help the player characters to explore their surroundings, as well as explore their functional role as part of a team. Pardon me. Without having the benefit of a character class to guide them. Remember, level 0 adventurers, you get your racial stats, and you get your background stats. The first encounter of the Eberron Gumshoe Chronicles Brooch Poacher Mysteries for 0-level characters. A corrupt gnome scoundrel has stolen an insignia of the Silver Flame from one of their acolytes, Cylindra Sloan, and she contracts the upstart detective agency where the characters moonlight to retrieve it without drawing attention. Objectives. A gnome named Pantra, who goes by the moniker Ninepin because of the underground game of ninepin bowling that she runs, earns a small income from her bowling business. She makes her larger scores by stealing valuable jewelry from the patrons of her business. Ninepin's latest victim was Salandra, an acolyte of the Silver Flame, who, despite her order's ban on gambling, can't help herself. She loves bowling. Ninepin stole the brooch that Salandra wears that marks her station within the Church of the Silver Flame. Salandra strongly suspects that Ninepin stole the brooch, but she doesn't want to take the matter to the authorities because her illegal bowling habit might be reported to her superiors in the church. So, she comes to the adventurers to investigate for her. As a last resort, she could ask her younger brother Todd, a patronizing Silver Flame knight, but would prefer not to involve him. If asked, she relays her worry that he'll tell his superiors and remind her about the misstep for the rest of her days. Case file. Use the details from objectives to instruct the characters on their job. Further details are below. Salandra is a middle-aged human who appears wrinkled with fretful worry lines cut deep into her face. She hopes for the characters to find her Silver Flame pendant before her superiors in the church realize it's missing. Ninepin runs her bowling game out of a tavern called the Pleasant Perch. There is a secret area below the Pleasant Perch that the owner lets Ninepin use. Bowling isn't illegal and neither is gambling, but Ninepin consorts with some rough characters from Lower Dura and elsewhere, and they prefer the privacy. Salandra's superior in the church would banish her if he learned she was bowling and gambling. The brooch that Salandra lost isn't terribly valuable in terms of monetary value, but someone wearing it could pose as an acolyte of the Silver Flame to gain access to the church's resources or locations. And lastly, there's a password that changes each week to gain access to the game, but Salandra hasn't been told the new password. The characters must find their way in. The secret door and staircase to the bowling area is behind the bar. So here's our location, the Pleasant Perch. The Pleasant Perch is a working-class tavern operated by Schley Grew, a respectable goblin who keeps her place clean and her clients happy. Ninepin gives Schley a cut of the gambling profits from the bowling to keep her out of the public eye. Schley greets the characters when they enter. She feigns ignorance if they mention a bowling area, but a DC 12 charisma check can get her to relent. Now, do you see why they just call it a charisma check? Remember, this is level 0. You may not have... Your background could give it to you, and if so, then hey, you're better at this than others. This is meant for level 0 characters. Decrease the DC by 1 for every 2 silver points of bribes forked over. They can also try to find the secret door with a intelligence investigation check. Schley, so this is the direct route, but it does require specialization and sort of the assertion of themselves. Schley doesn't want to call the city watch and draw attention to the game. Complication, there's a bouncer. Schley employs a hobgoblin bouncer called Sweetie to deal with trouble. If the characters give Schley a difficult time, Sweetie can insert herself into the discussion, weapon first. In the bowling area beneath the Pleasant Perch, Ninepin the Gnome holds court. There are 6 lanes, each full of bowlers of varying skill. Some lanes contain people practicing, whereas high-stakes games are taking place on other lanes. Ninepin greets the characters when they descend, asking what she can do for them. She doesn't have the brooch anymore, so the characters can't locate it. After some conversation, the characters might be able to convince Ninepin to admit she sold the brooch. I found it, and no one came to claim it, and so I sold it to an interested party. To another goblin from the cogs called Gomi. This information costs almost all the gold the characters possess unless they can beat Ninepin in a game of bowling. In order to play, Ninepin insists the characters put up a total of 5 silver pieces. To win the match, each character must succeed on a DC 12 ability check. The following ability and skill combinations are suggested, but you can use your own judgment. dexterity athletics, intelligence athletics, strength sleight of hand, and dexterity nature. Now you look at this and you might say, whoa, hold on, what's going on here? What's going on? Isn't athletic strength normally? Doesn't always have to be. In a game of bowling, where you can have a functional bowling ball of, 8 pounds? 10? Bowling isn't necessarily a matter of how hard you hit. It's the strategy of where you hit and getting that ball down the alleyway to hit. And so you can call on some different mixes at any point in time, but especially in this instance, this highlights a very important point that you can mix and match. 9-pin doesn't cheat, and she expects the characters to play fairly as well. DC 12 checks are needed to successfully cheat or hide cheating, such as using magic. Each character makes 2 checks. In order to beat 9-pin, 75% of the checks must succeed. So if there are 6 characters, 9 ability checks must succeed. If the party fails, they must bribe 9-pin with most of their gold to get the information. The bowling I grew up with, the ball weighs 3.5. This seems a very light one. I mean, there's going to be a point where you can't knock over the pins. Unless you're referencing something else, Misfit, I'm completely missing it. Attacking or intimidating 9-pin. 9-pin's allies are teaming with ruffians and other skilled fighters. If the characters raise arms against the gnome, these people quickly come to her rescue and overwhelm the characters. They are rudely ejected from the tavern. Duck pin bowling, only found in 5 or 6 states. I have not even heard of duck pin bowling, Misfit. Can you describe that a bit? If the characters defeat 9-pin at her own game, or if they bribe her, she tells them that she sold the silver flame brooch to a goblin cut purse from the cogs called Gomi. She's not sure what he has plans to do with it, but it probably is something illegal and profitable. If the characters take advantage of Solandra's situation or the money without fulfilling the mission, Solandra's brother Todd tracks them down to insist they reconsider, should news of their misdeeds spread like wildfire through the church. See the adventure Cogs on Fire for this continuation of the story. Solandra gives the characters 5 gold at the start of their mission. So there you go. That's the money you have on hand. So, ta-da! We have the start of a couple little gumshoe mysteries. This one starts out by doing a basic bar investigation. You go and you have a competition. There's an overarching threat, and there is a way to do good. And yet you realize in the noir setting, even good people have vices. This mini adventure, this one shot, could take a couple hours, but this sets the stage very well against everything that we just went through above. The pins are shorter and squatter. The average pro is between 130 to 150 average. Huh. Oh, so the balls don't even have finger holes. The origin of the sport is a subject of some debate. I love it when a Wikipedia entry has something similar to that. One possible origin is that duckpin bowling began in Baltimore around 1900. Oh. Chemison? Chemison? My goodness. Thank you. Good night, everyone. I'm off to bed. I'll be back at some point in the near future. Klepto, thanks for coming out, engaging in storytelling. It's always a pleasure to have you back here. And I'm glad that you found us and you stuck around. And I hope that in some ways this channel is a good outlet for you to get your creative juices flowing and to give you this sort of platform to continue thinking. Oh my gosh, Chemison. You've convinced me it's time to run an Eberron game. Well, Zesty, all of the information is here for you. If you don't, I mean, if you have the PDFs yourself, obviously give them a look. If you need a little bit of a help or primer, we did go over the Wayfinder's Guide to Eberron last year, and last week we just went over a lot of the other, more of the crunchy bits to the Morgrave Miscellany. I love it. My brain stays juicy when I'm here. That's awesome, Klepto. I'm glad. My brother actually held the record for high game for 1 week when someone else had a higher score, but a sloppier game. See, I love learning this stuff, Misfit. I'll love it. Plus, look, we learned something it's even uncommon, you know, in this country, let alone others. And now you have something that you can insert into your own fantasy game, and people are like, "Oh, that's cool." Even though it exists, but you put your own take on it. I do sincerely hope that this is inspirational. I hope that by having a conversation about this type of storytelling, or look, strip the noir away. What we've talked about with levels, with a session 0, with level 0 characters, you can apply that to any game that you're running. Any D&D game, like kind of comical, high fantasy, you know, low or no fantasy, more like gritty realism. Doesn't have to be noir, but it's more like savage survival. You can take these concepts, and you can, you know, understand that you can put emotion in your game in different ways, and that building your setting, building your campaign setting, is key to telling your story and to helping your players have a lot more fun. To realizing you don't have to run a campaign that goes to level 20. You could run a whole noir campaign. Remember, in Eberron, the king is level 7. If your players get their specialties by level 3, they're BSDs in Eberron. You know, people are going to be respecting them for that. They hold sway at level 3, and they have a lot of power because this is more about the storytelling. This is you don't have the stats per se for the social clout. You have a charisma score, yeah. But through the environment, you're presenting something and you're giving them power above even, you know, what a magic item could possibly do. When you get an entire neighborhood on your side who's willing to back you up, you know, if the time comes to it, I don't know, you're being chased by the mob enforcer, and you go back to your neighborhood and you kind of, you know, caw, you give the signal, and everyone in the projects pokes their head out their window and goes, caw. The mob enforcers, faced with several buildings of people who are staring down and angry. You never had to roll a die. And yet we just had a combat finish because it never started. One lesson that Derek gives when he talks about vampire is, you know, if you're rolling dice, if you've gotten into combat, something's gone wrong. In this noir story, it's not that combat doesn't happen or it's not even imposed on you, even if you didn't want it. Right? You could do the whole Jackie Chan, I don't want no trouble. But, you know, trouble can still come for you. But, you know, in this sense, if you are engaged in combat, something's wrong because you could very well die in any combat, especially if you keep at low level. I was thinking, got a random idea. You know the story about the Grim Reaper. Chemison, one day I'll get into a beginner's game. I certainly hope that you'll have that opportunity to, Chemison. And, you know, for any games that I have an opening in, I will broadcast that on Discord. And if that's something that you're free to play in, you know that you're welcome to step up and throw your hat in that arena. Yeah, Derek, all it takes is one crit, right? I mean, look at real life. I don't know, you're at a little league game. And, you know, something happens and you stand up and you're like, boo, the ref, and the ref's brother is there. And, you know, you get into a skirmish in the bleachers over something it's a kid's game. And all it takes is for the other dude to not even like swing hard, but just get you off balance, and you fall off the back of the bleachers and break your neck. Was combat really the best option? Because that's all it takes. If my new job wasn't so shitty time schedule-wise, I would love to run a second game with newer people. I may end up doing it and just make it an every other week thing. Should I run a beginner's game as a beginner DM? No, just kidding. Bad idea. Derek says to Klepto, try running as a beginner DM to play for 5-10-year vets. Got a slumber. All right. Hey, Technotron, thank you for joining us and sharing that Lego Dryad, that Lego Dryder. That was really cool. And, man, plopping that on a table in front of people, I'm sure would get some looks. That's good stuff, brother. Character death is so easy sometimes, says Coffee Cat. Challenge the Grim Reaper to a game of tic-tac-toe because the only way to win tic-tac-toe is to not play, or you just draw over and over again. In order to win and claim a soul, he has to refuse the challenge. And by refusing the challenge, you win by default. You know, Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey had a very interesting take on that as well, Physaris. Oh, snap. Hey, Zesty Utters, thank you for the follow. It'll pop up here in a second, but I sees it in chat. Thank you very much. It's fine. It happens. It happens. I love all the characters I run with and hate to see them if they die. It's tough, Coffee, you know, especially if you get invested in there. It's, you know, I think it was Rhodium that pointed it out in our Discord earlier when he quoted you saying, I don't want to name the leech because I don't want to get attached to it. Now, he might have been going off of the pun that the leech would attach to you. But at the same time, even though Jade sees Mordecai as a leech, you know, you named Jade. And Jade, even if you didn't like her, and you see, this is the interesting part. Even if Mordecai was awkward around Jade or didn't like Jade or even felt sorry for Jade, like she was kind of a beaten puppy, right? Mordecai is still torn up about the loss of Jade. The name, the character, both. Something along those lines. Puns are not my default setting. I only realized it after the fact. No, that's fine. Oh, hey, Lost Streaming. Welcome. I had a character die last weekend, too. I need to go now. My back is hurting. Oh, Rosia. Well, hey, go stretch out. You know, take some Tylenol if you need it. Rosia, thank you for hanging out with us. And for sharing your stories. I very much appreciate it. It's a pleasure to have you around, Rosia. New character is way better now, says Lost Streaming. Klepto to Derek. I really like storytelling, and I'm constantly creating random stories in my head, so DMing always seems fun to me. Klepto, because this is a storytelling game, yeah, you know, the mechanics can seem kind of confusing, or you might feel like you get lost in it because of all the different interactions and dice rolls. Don't let that put you off. If you want to tell a story, congratulations, you're a DM. I'd suggest getting the Dungeon Master's Guide for sure, if you don't already have it. And if you want to pick up some other, some things like Xanathar's Guide has some good DM content in it. Obviously, supplements like this have good stuff in it. But if you already want to tell a story, congratulations, that's most of what you need to be a DM. Mordecai has a soft spot for her. Definitely didn't know how to handle her sometimes, but felt sorry that she was always so anxious and just wanted her to have some fun and relax. Well, maybe she did, right? This is what she wanted, question mark? I don't know. It's something interesting to think about, huh? All right. I'm going to get up and take another break, everyone. Stretch my legs, maybe eat a couple more of these nachos without trying to look slovenly or make noises on the microphone. And when we come back, we can still talk. If you want, we can spend a little bit of time. If you want to play Drawful or if you want to go back. We didn't get to play TKO last night, so we can do some party games. If any of you need a Dungeon Workshop stuff, we can talk Dungeon Workshop. We'll have fun with it. Okay, Derek, I'll respond to you then during this break. So I'll be right back, everyone.